If your daughter is bright, empathetic, verbal, but constantly interrupts, is easily distracted, and struggles with their emotional regulation, this episode is for you. Girls with ADHD don't always look the way that we expect people with ADHD to look. My name is Mandy. I'm a behavior analyst, parent coach, and mom to a daughter with ADHD. And today, we are going to get into what ADHD looks like for girls on the Behavior Blueprint. Hi, I'm Mandy, the family behaviorist, and these are three of my favorite little humans.
Hi, I'm on the podcast. Let's do this.
Let's do this. This is the Behavior Blueprint where we can figure out why kids do what they do.
Is that why parents yell sometimes?
Sometimes, because parenthood is messy, behavior is complex, but with the right blueprint, we can figure it out together.
Yeah.
As you guys all know, I have an extensive background in special education. I used to be a special education teacher. I have been a behavior analyst for over 10 years, working with lots of children with ADHD. And I am dyslexic myself, which came with those executive functioning deficits when I was in school. So I'm looking at it from the parenting lens, wondering how my mother survived parenting me. I've shared a lot about this topic on my Instagram and TikTok, but I think it's time to get into a more in-depth conversation that isn't broken down into 90-second segments. So let's get into ADHD in girls. And where do we even start? There are two different types of ADHD, hyperactive and inattentive. Girls are often more inattentive, meaning more easily distracted, more internally distracted, but often quiet. Now, if they are in a classroom with 23 kids, and perhaps there's a couple boys or girls with hyperactive ADHD who are jumping off the walls, who are constantly interrupting, who, can't get out of their own way, or causing huge distractions, running out of the room, that little girl sitting there quietly staring at the wall can go really easily overlooked. Girls also tend to rely on social cues a little bit more. So, for example, my daughter, when she was in first grade, would get really easily distracted. But when her focus came back, she could look around at her peers to figure out what she's doing. Also, in the school setting, there are usually written directions, even as young as kindergarten or first grade. So when your child starts to read or there's these visual cues, when they come back, and the girls do, right? They get distracted and they come back to attention. They can rely on a lot of these strategies to help them get back to where they need to be. Therefore, it's not quite as egregious as some of the symptoms might look at home. For me, my daughter was diagnosed with ADHD in first grade. And personally, we went and got a neuropsychological evaluation. There are several ways to diagnose ADHD. You can go to your doctor and do rating scales. Those are called Vanderbilt rating scales. You complete them, the teacher completes them, and the doctor analyzes them. You could go and get a neuropsychological evaluation. The reason that we did this was I'm dyslexic, as I mentioned, so I wanted to rule out any learning disability. My daughter was in intervention. So intervention in school is when a kid is struggling with reading, writing, math, they start to get some extra help. Basically, we're trying to see if we just pull them once a week, will that catch them up or whatever that might look like. And so she was in intervention. So I was like, uh-oh, this might be early signs of dyslexia. So I went and got the neuropsychological evaluation. Another option is you can refer to the school. You can do this under an IEP, which would mean there's specialized instruction, or a 504, which is just accommodations. So you can say to the school, I have concerns in the area of attention, and land like a 504 evaluation. The 504 evaluation is going to do something very similar to what the doctor would do with rating scales. However, the school does not have an obligation to say yes. So, as I mentioned a second ago, I went and got a neuropsychological evaluation because the school could have said to me, we want to try this first. We want to wait a second. We're not seeing the same thing. Okay, so the ways to go about diagnosis, you can go to your doctor, get rating scales, you can go to your school for an IEP or a 504 assessment, or you can go and get a neuropsychological eval. You can also see a psychiatrist. So those are the variety of ways that you can do that. As I mentioned, we went and got the neuropsychological evaluation. When Lola was diagnosed in first grade, I went back to her kindergarten teacher and I said, oh my gosh, were you trying to tell me this and I didn't pick up on the cues? And she said, no, I didn't notice. Furthermore, we got the 504, we got the diagnosis, we chose to medicate, which we can explore later. And her second grade teacher said, it's not even really that big of a problem. And that's sort of been a little bit of a theme through my daughter's educational career. Now, her third grade teacher and now fourth grade teacher do recognize that she has ADHD and she needs these accommodations, but her behavior is not egregious. She could have very easily kept going and been pushed through. And that's why I want to get to why this is one of the worst things that happens to girls. In the younger grades, girls go largely undiagnosed for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Maybe they're hyperactive, it's not as egregious, or they just can get kind of pushed along and they can get caught up, and that's amazing. Do I think that my daughter needs over the top supports? No. Do I think school sees half the things I see at home? No. We've had in depth conversations about it. But I will tell you, in fifth and sixth grade, the expectations start to increase. And especially girls with ADHD who have been undiagnosed or improperly diagnosed start to fall through the cracks at that point. The demands increase significantly. The demands on their organization, those executive functioning skills, planning, organizing, keeping track of things, they start to have multiple teachers, which they have to manage different personalities and different expectations, and the rigor increases. Those academic demands start to increase. So maybe in second grade, if I'm a little bit distracted, I could get caught up in a minute, or we have time on Friday to get caught up. But suddenly I'm in sixth grade, I have 7 teachers, and I didn't pay attention half of math class, and now math class is done and I'm in social studies. It starts to snowball, and our girls can sometimes fall apart. I do want to say there is a strong correlation for girls developing other mental health things such as anxiety and depression when ADHD has been missed. Also, they can exist at the same time. So I'm not saying one or the other. But what happens is the anxiety ADHD can be comorbid. They can share a lot of symptoms. And that can be, I didn't get done what I was supposed to do. And now I'm anxious about the fact that didn't get it done. Or in my home, mom told me what to do and I didn't get it done. And now mom's mad at me. And it can become really, really cyclical and really difficult to get out of those patterns. As I mentioned, school doesn't see a lot of the things that I did. And to be honest, I didn't recognize it either. My poor daughter, her mother is a behavior analyst, so she has visual schedules, she has Alexis, she has timers. Those all existed before we had any sort of ADHD diagnosis. However, once her teacher brought this to my attention, it was sort of a light bulb moment. My daughter will walk away from a running faucet. Showers can sometimes take an hour. The other day, literally 2 days ago, Lola came downstairs after her shower, which I had to send her little sister up to say, "Are you almost done?" And I could tell she didn't wash her hair. And she was like, "I was playing in there and I got distracted and I forgot to wash my hair." Been there. So it was sort of these little things that really emphasized her distractibility. There was one time that Lola was wearing her soccer uniform and we'd asked her to change like 7 times. And she literally would see a butterfly and be off chasing. One of the things that's difficult about girls with ADHD is that it can seem really defiant. So with that soccer uniform example, my partner was like, at first I thought she was just like defying me. But as I watched her, I could tell she just couldn't get out of her own way. This has come up a lot for my daughter, especially lately. This week alone, I am so cool, calm, and collected, and I'm absolutely the perfect parent. But I lost my ever living mind on my children the other day. I am not proud of this and I am not advocating for this. But we had just talked about how we needed to work as a family and everyone needed to do their part. And they walked away from the dinner table and left all their dishes. And I went upstairs and they'd taken off all of their clothes and their underwear was in their pants and their clothing were all over the place. And I walked into the bathroom and there was toothpaste all over the sink. And I was super frustrated. And so I lost my cool, and we cleaned it all up together. And then we talked about what was happening. And what I said to Lola, I said, one of my frustrations is I say to you, "Hey, please put your bowl in the dishwasher." And you'll say, "Just a second, mom," and you'll dip out. Now, I'm not going to lie. Personally, I saw this as incredibly avoidant. She's avoiding doing what I'm asking her to do. She's sneaking away to get out of responsibility, all of that sort of stuff. So when I talked to her about that, I was like, "Hey, tell me about that." She said, "I just have so many things in my mind. And when you tell me something, my mind is going so fast and there's already something else I need to go do. Like, for example, I had to go get my shoes and you asked me to do the dish. And I'm like, well, wait a second. If I don't do the shoes, I'm going to forget." Oh my gosh. Thanks for telling me that. It was a light bulb moment. These happen like every week for me and my daughter. So I said, okay, one of the things that I can work on is writing things down. One of the things I need you to work on is to tell me what you're doing. I have to go get my shoes first or I'll forget. Because my answer might be, all right, you know what? I'm going to write a list. I need you to do the dishes and then I need you to go get your shoes. She is very good at telling me when I am overwhelming her. She will say to me, "You are giving me way too many directions." And it's a reminder that I need. I don't have ADHD. I don't think, maybe you can diagnose me at the end of this episode, but I am a mom and I have 50 browsers open at any given time. I'm constantly thinking about who needs their backpack checked, who needs the lunch made. Did I reply to that teacher's email? Do I have this work thing ready to go? Did I take the chicken out of the fridge for dinner? All of that sort of stuff. And so I have to be mindful about what I am putting on her. Now, I get lost in this all the time. There will be times where I am like, just get out of the soccer uniform, just put the dish away, all of that sort of stuff. And I need to take a step back and figure out what her needs are and how I can meet those needs more appropriately. Now, listen, I am not going to follow my daughter around making lists the rest of her life. So I have to teach her that skill as well. But right now, I need to start by giving her the intervention, right? I need to replace the distractibility with the intervention, which in this case is writing it down. And then I need to start over time. She's only 9, working on her developing that skill herself. We talk about this a lot and we do it a lot. She is part of this. So, for example, on the weekends, I always write a list of the things that I need to do. Just again, so many browser tabs. I have to do the laundry, I have to get the dishes, I have to get a card for my friend, I have to pick up a present for this birthday, all of that sort of stuff. I made my daughters part of that. So now I will say to them, "Hey, can you grab a piece of paper and write a list for me?" We make little boxes, we write it all out. It writes weekend to do. We put fun things on there like we want to make banana bread and we want to go get a pedicure, whatever that might look like. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I want her to work on the skill of writing things down because it's incredibly difficult to hold it all in her memory. And two, I want her to reference that. I want to preview the things we're going to do so she can wrap her head around that. Sometimes when you say to a kid with ADHD, "Okay, we got to go now," there can be, in my case, panic, my daughter's case, panic around what that looks like. So, working on the skill deficit. What is the problem here? You're giving me too many directions. Let's write them down. Another thing I want to talk about is the emotional regulation. Okay, so when my daughter was 5 years old, we were working on. She had, big feelings. Girls with ADHD often have really big feelings to what I would perceive as a small problem. Okay, and so what we were working on was, is this a big problem or a little problem? And Lola was able to identify that after the fact. She could say, "Oh, that was a little problem," but it wasn't helping us change the behavior in the moment. Okay, so I look for patterns. You hear this in every podcast episode I record. I look for patterns. And the pattern that was emerging was that she had this big reaction. She could talk about it after the fact, but the reactions kept happening. So I took off the therapeutic lens, or I just put it to the side. We still worked on big problem, little problem, but I started to approach it more behaviorally. In Lola's case, her behavior was panic. Her behavior was needing help and not asking. So something broke, something fell, something she couldn't get a dress on, she couldn't get a shoe off. It would be like, "I can't get the shoe off," instead of, "Could you help me, please?" So once I realized that, and for the record, it took me a little bit of time, we shifted our focus. I added reinforcement to this. So again, Lola was 5 at the time. I said to her, "When you can use your words and ask for help during obvious times of frustration, when you can do that 5 times, you can earn something." Ironically, Lola wanted to earn a crybaby. It's very funny to me because we were trying to reduce her crying. So she wanted to earn a crybaby, so we started to work on that. The next day, Lola threw a frisbee into the lake, and that would have normally been, "The frisbee's gone forever." And she took a deep breath and said, "Could you help me get the frisbee, please?" And I said, "Oh my goodness, we need to check a box off. Of course I can help you. I love the way you asked for help." All of that sort of good stuff. So those are the things we started working on. What do you want them to do instead? Be really careful about, like, don't cry, don't freak out, don't panic, right? I want to validate the feeling and replace the behavior. When you're feeling panicked, what can we do? So just keep that in mind when you have those big reactions. How can we put a behavior plan in place to help them build the skill that's lacking? And in this case, the skill that was lacking was the ability to ask for help. Another part of that with the emotional regulation was naming her feeling. This is something my daughter is so good at now, and honestly, I love it. She will say to me, "I am feeling really panicked right now." Love that. The reason that that is so important is because once you name that, I can help you come up with a strategy, or we can start to prompt what your strategies might be. But if I don't recognize you're panicked, and this is my thing, I got to work on this as well. I can be like, why are you running around like that? We need to be getting in the car, or whatever that might look like. So it's also a good checks and balance for me. The other day, she said to me, I was so proud of her. We're getting ready to go to soccer, and she goes over and she's like, I'm feeling really panicked. I can't find my cleat. Okay. And this was great because I was able to say, we wore it in the house yesterday. So it has to be somewhere in this house. Let's start looking in your room. Let's look in your locker, all of those sort of things. I will say, if she had said to me, I can't find my cleat, I don't know, and exhibited the panic she was feeling, I likely would have been like, okay, this isn't the way to handle it, and really focused on the behavior instead of the skill deficit, which is how do we solve this problem? So, as much as this is for her, it's also for me because when she can come to me and name it, I'm more focused on problem solving than I am how do I get this over the top reaction to stop. I want to be super clear, this is hard work. It's hard work for her and it's hard work for me. So, we need to check in with each other about what that might look like. Another thing I want to touch on is the awareness. So, I mentioned earlier we did decide to medicate. And the reason we decided to medicate was one, the statistics on girls' effect on their self esteem with ADHD. And two, at 6 years old, Lola verbalized that in no uncertain terms. She said to me, Sally sitting next to me just sits there and focuses, and I am trying and trying and trying, and I just can't. Oh my goodness. So, we have been on medication since second grade. I don't know why I said we. She has been on medication since second grade. She has an open book about this. She knows I am doing this podcast episode. We talk about it a lot. It is a badge of honor in this family. We have ADHD and we are proud of it. And we talk about this a lot. I started off talking about it when Lola went for that assessment. I said, you know what? I have trouble reading. You might have trouble reading too. Your daddy has a little bit of trouble focusing. You might have trouble focusing too. Neither of them are bad things. We're both functioning adults, but we just need to know how your brain works. We talk about her ADHD all the time. We talk about it as a superpower. I will say my daughter is never bored. You could give her a cardboard box and she will create 700 things out of it. There will be a giant mess, just to be super clear, but she is smart and intelligent and inquisitive. She gets those quickie boxes every month, and God, she can put that entire thing together and it's motorized, and she loves to know how things work, and that is so cool. However, she also is highly distracted and she leaves things behind and she's a little bit messy. So we talk about that. I said, oh, this is the thing your brain is so good at, and this is the thing that's a little bit tougher. That's okay. We're going to find systems that work for you. At this point, Lola responds to a system. So if I put something in place, if I put a visual schedule, if I put Alexa, if I put Skylight, she responds to it and uses it, which is phenomenal. But I know as she gets older, and I know this because I was this, she's going to start to push back. She's going to say, I got it up here. She's going to do all the things that I did. And it's going to be my job to continue to expose her to different interventions. When she gets a phone one day, high school probably, talking about how can we use it to help you? What are the reminders you need to set up? All of those sort of things. And it's going to be trial and error, and there is no one size fits all. My advice to you is meet them where they're at. That might mean you decrease your expectations. That might mean you're just working on the water bottle in the morning or whatever that might look like. But just be really mindful about meeting your child where they're at and building up from there. Another really difficult thing for my daughter is interrupting. One day we had friends over and everyone was chatting and somebody mentioned soccer. And Lola was like, I play soccer. Oh my God, I love soccer. So much, so fun. And somebody else mentioned a boat. She's like, oh my God, my dad has a boat. We love a boat. We're going to go on a boat all the time. And I stopped her and I was like, you're one-upping. Stop. I pulled her aside. I tried not to embarrass her. And then I went on about my day and I realized she really wasn't one-upping. She really isn't. She's just trying to contribute to the conversation, and she does it in a way that steamrolls everybody. So what I started working with her on is a nonverbal cue for when she's doing that. I also did some role playing. So I pulled her aside and I was like, hey, start talking about, I don't know, your favorite thing. And she's like, oh my God, I love flowers. I was like, flowers? Oh my God, I love flowers. I planted flowers too, and I have so many flowers. And she sort of looked at me And I said, talk about something else. Just soccer. Oh my God, I played soccer. I played soccer too. I was center mid. I was really, really good at soccer. And she looked at me and I said, yeah, that's kind of what you're doing. And she's so articulate and so aware. She's like, I don't mean to be. I'm just afraid I'm going to lose my thought. Totally. Absolutely. So we came up with a nonverbal cue when I'm in her area, and it's just like a light pinch on the, not even a pinch, like a light squeeze on the elbow to help her be one, more aware that she's doing it. She doesn't mean to be, she just wants to contribute. And two, how can we keep that thought in your head? Typically, people with ADHD, when you're in a conversation, they hear something and they're like, oh my God, now I have to keep this thought in my head because I want to respond and I don't want to interrupt and they don't hear anything else that is said. So this is something that is going to be a work in progress, but awareness of it is so essential. So nonverbal cue, role playing, and making her aware that it's happening can be really, really helpful. Another thing that people with ADHD, girls with ADHD miss is sort of that perspective. So if you have somebody in your life with ADHD, it can be really helpful to give them that perspective. We have somebody in our life with ADHD that's very close to my daughters, and they're super silly. They are like such a fun adult. They're so fun, they're super silly, but they sometimes take it a little bit too far. So, for example, they love to pick my daughters up and pretend to put them in the trash can. Guess how my daughters feel about that? They don't love that. So, the point here, though, is I would say to Lola sometimes when she's being particularly nudgy, it's like, hey, remember how it feels when you don't want to be in the trash can and that person's being super silly and constantly doing that? Like, you're doing that right now. And it's a really good perspective of her. Ooh, okay. Just so she knows what it feels like on the other end. So I mentioned earlier, we do medicate my daughter. She is an active part of that discussion. She comes with me to the doctor. We went for a med check in October, and I was like, all right, like I prepped her, like, how do you feel about this? And she was a big part of the conversation, which is really lovely. One of the things is, though, one day we forgot meds. We'd had a sleepover. We didn't have our meds that day. And Lola is largely inattentive, but there can be a nudging aspect of it. At the end of the day, she was in tears. And I said, what's going on? And she said, everything I did was annoying everybody. And they'd tell me to stop, and I'd stop. And then they'd tell me the next thing I was doing and was annoying, and I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my goodness. How do you even save that poor sweet soul? Because here's the thing. Sometimes with ADHD, our kids can be really nudgy and annoying. Here's the other thing. It is really hard to explain what nudgy and annoying are. It's not like I can say, you're literally poking your sister and it bothers her, stop poking her. It's all these really small, really nuanced behaviors, which brings me to another point. Like most parents, I think, often default to stop doing that. And what we need to focus on is what she should do instead. So if her body's moving and she's bumping into people, instead of being like, stop moving, I might say, oof, your body needs to move. And it's kind of bothering people the way you're bumping into them. So why don't we go ride our bike outside or give them something to do, but help them to be aware, like, hey, look what you're doing. I think your body is telling you it needs to move, whatever that might look like. The other part of that day, that conversation with those tears, was a med conversation. Now, I am not advocating for anybody to do anything. I am not a doctor. I am sharing our personal journey. I will say that our generation, I'm 39, grew up with Ritalin and Adderall, and there was this misnomer that they are, your brother, friend, cousin, we're all just medicated. And there weren't really any interventions. We have come really far as a society and with our ADHD understanding. And it's important that you have interventions in addition to medication if you choose to medicate, okay? You can have interventions without medication. You cannot have medication without interventions, okay? We need to teach. So whether that's visual schedules, body awareness, social skills, all of that, I need to teach. Now, I will say, in our case, the medication drastically impacts my daughter's ability to attend to those interventions. She's much more willing and able to respond to that feedback when she's on medication. So that day when there were lots of tears, it was a really good conversation for us. I said, I don't ever want you to feel this way. And I said, when you have your medication, do you feel this way? And she said, no, I don't. And I said, okay, great. So this is why we medicate. Now, do I wish that I had, if she had her medication that day? Yes, I do. I do, because I don't want her to feel that way. I don't want her to see the dark side just to validate our choice. But this is something that's going to continue to be explored. The other day, I made a comment about medication for life, and she goes, I need this for life. And I said to her, no, you do not. If there comes a point where you don't want to be on medication anymore and you are an adult or you decide that at 14, that's great. And you and I are going to come up with a criteria together about checks and balances we need to put in place so that you don't need this support. But those are all the things that we are going to continue to work on. One other thing I wanted to touch on was just visual supports. Children with ADHD, in general, hear 20,000 more negative comments by the age of 10. And I can see myself doing it. I absolutely know that I redirect and correct my daughter with ADHD more so than my children without. I know I do. So I need to be aware of that, and I need to build in some tools, one of which is those visuals I talked about. When we are constantly giving verbal directions, get your shoes, get your cleats, get your backpack, whatever that might look like, our children can not only become incredibly reliant on those prompts, they can be really, really hard to fade. So I want you to be super aware. This is easier said than done, and I mess it up weekly. Check in with your children. My daughter and I have a journal where we write back and forth. And one time she was like, can we have a code word for this? I don't like the way I feel about all of that. And so this is a work in progress. We have to meet her social emotional needs. We have to work on her awareness. We have to build in those visual skills. When Lola was in second grade, she lost 2 jackets in the month of October. Gone, lost them. So we put a little reminder on her backpack. And what was really cool about that is we made this reminder and she drew pictures because I don't think she could read yet or was learning how to read. And we Velcroed it. We put it on her backpack. And it was great. She'd check it off each day. I told her teacher it was amazing. And then we got to second grade. She's like, Mom, that's embarrassing. I was like, okay, cool. So I found this little keychain that you could put pictures. And so I put tons of pictures of our family, but the first 5 pictures were water bottle, backpack, lunchbox, jacket. And then we sort of progressed from there. Now, again, I look for patterns. The third time we went to lacrosse practice without our goggles, I put a list on our backpack and she was embarrassed. And I was trying to figure out a way to do it so it wasn't embarrassing. And she was embarrassed until she saw her friend had one as well. And then it became kind of cool. So maybe as society, for all of our children, we should put a little tag on their backpack so they know what they need. Maybe that will help a little bit. Some of the things I want you to take away from this episode are the things that you can do right now. If you suspect your daughter has ADHD, there are avenues to explore getting that diagnosis. I do want to advocate for you and tell you, if school says there's no problem here, that doesn't mean there's no problem. Like I said earlier in the episode, many of Lola's teachers would be like, she's good. And she is, because she's smart and she's figured it out. But be careful because the demands do increase and it gets more difficult. And if you're seeing some of these at home, that doesn't mean they don't exist at school. It might mean they don't give you a 504, they don't give you a plan because it doesn't impact school, but that diagnosis can still help home. Be really mindful of the executive functioning deficits, the planning, the organizing. What systems can you put in place? Like I said, we have visual schedules. We use Alexa. We use Skylight. I have a uniform bag that every uniform goes in, so it's less parts to keep track of. Just sort of think, what barriers can I eliminate for my child in this moment? Be really mindful of the role you're playing. This is something I am constantly self-assessing. I ask her for feedback. I ask my partner for feedback. I try to check in as often as possible. I want her to feel supported. The other day, when I'd given her multiple directions to put the bowl away, I said to her, hey, how does it feel when you ask me to get milk in the morning and I'm running around and I don't get it? And she was like, I don't know. And so I asked her sister, said, how does it feel? And she said, really frustrating. I said, you can tell me, hey, Mom, can I please have milk? I've asked 2 times and I'm feeling frustrated. Empower your children to give you that feedback. Man, it's tough to do. And the last part is continue to advocate for your child. If you feel yourself frustrated, I get it. Those are the moments where I step back and say, okay, I'm feeling really frustrated. So that means I need to build something in to support this whole system a little bit more. Listen, this is difficult work. It's even more difficult if you are a parent that struggles with ADHD yourself. That's a whole nother episode we can get in with what to do on that. But I hope there are some actionable takeaways for you here. Really work on the visuals, advocate for your child, keep the lines of communication open, ask for that feedback, and figure out how to support them best. And be really mindful about how often you are giving verbal directions. Okay, so on to our ADHD question. So first one, How do you help your child multitasking, especially during the morning routine with pre-meds? Okay, so I do want to validate this a little bit. And this is something that we are working on and tweaking a lot in our home because the morning when the meds haven't kicked in is really difficult for us. So, one thing, there is this medication called Jornay, which is a delayed release, extended release that you take at night. My insurance won't approve it, so I'm fighting with them right now. But I have worked with many families who have used it, and it makes a really big difference in the morning routine. So, just to give you that information. The next part is you might need to build in more support. So, one of the things that we have done with our morning routine is back it up. I used to be of the thought that like I did not want downtime. I wanted like morning routine to bust and like don't stop, go, keep going. When it backed it up 20 minutes, it not only allowed us a buffer zone, but it got to a point where we could add some reinforcement. Right now, it's games. My kids are playing this really cool game called Othello. And so if they're done enough, I've added the reinforcement of a game, which for me, it's not screen time. I don't really mind. That's one thing. The second part is remove any barrier you can, meaning make the lunches the night before, fill the water bottle, get the backpack, do all of that ahead of time. So we are removing as many barriers as possible. Lay out the outfit, all of that sort of stuff. The last thing is focus on the parts that really matter. So, like the brushing the teeth, it might not matter if the laundry is in the hamper, right? Maybe we have a designated time once a day at 6 p.m. where we make sure all of our laundry is in the hamper. That sort of thing is where I would focus on. Side quests are extremely difficult. Can I tell you something so funny? It's not funny, but we have a puppy, and my partner was like, Lola loves the puppy a lot, and it drives me bonkers, because she'll, like, just I'm like, "Please get your water bottle," and she's like, "Puppy!" And my partner was like, "I think she does that to get your attention," and I was like, no, it's she just is distracted." I was talking to her the other day about how does it feel when I don't respond to you, and she goes, well, then I just jump on Teenie and you respond immediately." Ouch. Accurate. Ooh. So anyway, the replacement for that was saying to me, "Hey, I'm really frustrated. Please pay attention." But eliminate as many barriers as possible. Back it up. That would be my advice for that. Okay, the next question is social skills for kids with ADHD. How do we teach them when they are resistant to that? Okay, they are resistant to that. One of my biggest pieces of advice here is we love a code word. We have come up with code words for everything: banana, pie, everything. Lola once left me a list because the embarrassment factor. And so if you're saying to your kid, like, stop showing off, it doesn't go over super well. And also removing them. The other part of this is role playing. When you're talking about a social skill, you want to work on it in isolation. So we sometimes avoid that. Let's say your child is terrible at losing. Well, lots of times we're like, oh, I'm not going to lose. I don't want them to lose. And then that creates less opportunities to practice. So work on it at home. Role play. Why don't you be your child and show what it's like when they constantly interrupt? The other part is we're going to have to work on social skills for a really long time. This is not a magic wand. We are going to have to keep chipping away at it. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to answer everything immediately. If any part of this resonated for you, please share with your friends or leave a review. It really means a world to me and makes a big difference. Also, if you'd like to talk about this more, please check out my Instagram, The Family Behaviorist. There's lots of options to work with me if you want to understand your daughter's ADHD and where to start. You can also join my club right on my website, thefamilybehaviorist.com, where we can talk more about this. But thank you so much for listening. Any review, like, comment, subscribe really means the world to me. So thank you so much for being here.